When you're shopping for a kayak, sometimes the choices can seem overwhelming. You need to make two decisions right up front. One is what you're going to be using your boat for and what your budget is. When you're trying to decide how to use your boat, think about the waters you're going to be paddling in and whether you're going to be doing multi-day trips, overnights, how much gear you need to carry. If you're going to be in whitewater and surf, obviously you need a boat that's specialized for those particular conditions. If you're going to be paddling in placid waters, very protected areas, lakes, ponds, flatwater rivers, then you might consider a shorter boat that does not carry a lot of gear. If you're going to be paddling in areas where you want to carry gear for the day or possibly an overnight, then you may need to have gear storage compartments and a slightly longer boat. If you're going to be paddling in exposed conditions offshore, you certainly want to think about moving into a sea kayak, which would be longer and equipped with bulkheads, which would create watertight compartments for storage and safety. A whitewater boat like this is short and very easy to maneuver. That's what you want in a fast-moving water situation. We're not going to talk about whitewater boats here. Instead, we're going to talk about recreational boats, touring boats, and sea kayaks. If you tried to take this boat out for a nice little day cruise, it would really drive you crazy because with every paddle stroke, it's going to turn. Here we have three classes of kayaks. We have recreational kayaks represented by the blue boat. Recreational kayaks are the shorter kayaks on the market. They're very good for protected waters but do not belong out on open water with exposure to any wind or tidal currents. And they don't have any ability to carry gear. Then we have the day touring boats. Most day touring boats will be anywhere from 12 to 16 feet long. Day touring boats give you a little bit of gear storage for a full day's gear, but are not suitable for multi-day trips or exposure to big conditions. Sea kayaks, which are usually 16 to 20 feet long, give you ample gear storage for multi-day trips, and they're very seaworthy and capable of being paddled offshore with adequate skills. Your budget will dictate what your kayak's made of. Here we have the same model in two different materials. One is a composite boat, which is a cloth and resin layup, and is going to be the most expensive choice. And then here is a polyethylene version of that same boat. The materials can range from polyethylene to fiberglass to more advanced composite layups like carbon fiber. A polyethylene boat will be the least expensive choice. If you move to fiberglass in that same model, you may have as much as a 50% price increase. If you move from fiberglass to a more advanced composite technology like carbon fiber, you could increase the price 25% more over its fiberglass cousin. The materials will not change the seamanship, the seaworthiness of the kayak or where you can take that boat. Instead, what it will affect is the stiffness and efficiency of travel and the weight of the boat, which is a major factor when you're moving the boat around on land or getting it on and off your car. Polyethylene boats are not as stiff as the composite layup boats. A boat that's not as stiff will waste more of your energy because as you move it forward through the water, you get some flexing of the hull. Composite boats also have much finer lines in their designs so that they're going to part water more cleanly and be more efficient as they travel through the water. At some point in narrowing your choices of kayak, you're going to be faced with choosing between a kayak with a rudder, a kayak with a skeg, or a kayak with neither. The hull design of the boat will determine whether it tracks well and moves in a straight line through the water in wind and seas, or whether it's a more maneuverable boat that may need to rely on the presence of a rudder or a skeg, or in your skill as a kayaker and comfort in leaning the boat as you paddle forward through the water. A skeg is a retractable fin that comes down close to the stern of the boat. It doesn't move from side to side like a rudder blade. It can go up and down, but unlike a rudder, which is an all or none proposition, a skeg blade can be controlled as to how deeply you want to set it. It's important that you retract it fully when you pull up onto a beach or you could damage the skeg blade. The skeg control is easily accessible from the cockpit and can be in the up position, the down position, or any position that you want in between. A rudder has two controls. One is the control on deck, which allows you to either raise or lower the rudder. And then you can control its side-to-side movement by using the foot braces inside the cockpit. This is a brace that you rest your foot on, and that will allow you to move the rudder from side to side using your feet. Ideally, you're using a rudder to enhance the tracking or the directional stability of your boat. A rudder actually doesn't enhance turning. It really is your kayak skills and your comfort in the boat that will enhance turning. Learning and getting comfortable in your boat, getting comfortable with leaning the boat on edge during a turning stroke will actually create a more powerful turning stroke than dropping your rudder and pushing on one of the pedals. Since a sea kayak usually has two bulkheads, that means that you can only take water into the center compartment. That's really key for your safety on open water conditions, because if you go to do a solo reentry or an assisted rescue, you've got to get that water out of the center compartment, and that's very doable in a sea kayak. If you are in a touring boat that does not have a forward bulkhead or doesn't have any bulkheads at all, you're going to have some way to displace the water from either end of the boat. To do that, you're going to need fully inflated flotation bags, and those will go up in the forward compartment and in the stern compartment. When you put them in place, it's also critical that they be tethered in place, because if you were to capsize and take on a lot of water in the boat, if the flotation bags are not tethered, they actually could pop out under certain conditions and blow away, and then the boat could become swamped and you'd be in big trouble. If you were in a recreational kayak, which has no bulkheads, you're going to be in very deep trouble quickly as you try to re-enter your boat or have someone try to help you empty that boat of water, because the large open cockpits of the recreational kayaks will take on a tremendous amount of water, and you have no way to displace that. That large cockpit can easily become swamped in certain conditions and make it almost impossible for you to climb back into the boat or even have a fellow paddler empty the boat of water. That's why recreational kayaks do not belong in open water or sea conditions. They're perfectly wonderful on lakes and ponds and protected flatwater rivers, and even a very protected harbor under benign conditions, but they do not belong in open water. They're a danger at that point. When I mention lakes, I'm really referring to the smaller lakes where you're near a shore at all times when you're paddling, and also lakes that are small enough that they're not exposed to a lot of wind and open water. There are 4 things to consider when finding a paddle that is an appropriate length. The most important factor is the width of your boat. You have to be able to get both blades in the water. The second most important factor is the blade design. If you use a paddle blade that's very long and narrow, you'll have to have an overall longer length to be able to get that blade in the water. The third factor is the size of the paddler. Someone that has a particularly long wingspan or has a long reach to the water might be able to use a shorter paddle. The fourth factor is the style of paddling. Most beginners have a more horizontal, low-angle stroke. That style stroke often calls for a slightly longer paddle. Someone that came from a racing or whitewater background with a more vertical stroke might find that they prefer shorter paddle lengths. Fawn is 6'4" and I'm 5'4". The fact is that we use the same paddle length because we have a similar blade design and we paddle boats of similar widths. So you see that those are the 2 most important factors, whereas the size of the paddler is not.
Our boats are 22 to 23 inches wide, and we both use about a 215 to 220 centimeter paddle.
215 is about as short as I would go for a paddle for a sea kayak. If I were getting up into a wider boat, like a 23.5, 24-inch wide boat, I might consider something in the 220 to 230 range. If I were in a tandem kayak, which is much wider, I'd look at a 240, possibly a 245.